Welcome back. So glad you guys could join us. I am here once again with my best friend, Nathan Pepin. How's it going today, Pepin?
Well, I would say I'm doing terrible, and that would be a lie. I am awesome. I'm amazing. This is great.
Very on brand. And you've brought a special guest here today.
Yes, this is my former colleague. His name is...
Patrick Carpenter.
Yeah. Oh wow. Going the full name. Okay, jeez. Wow, really bringing it out.
Can I call you Carp?
No.
Perfect. This is off to a great start.
And you can't call me any version of that.
Patty C?
I'll accept that.
Ooh, all right.
So Patrick and I have our side podcast called Does Anything Matter? And we started that because we just had super long, overly complex intellectual discussions at work. And we started the podcast because we stopped working together and we're like, hey, let's keep talking and record this and monetize it, because that's what
yeah, exactly. Up until now, most of it was irrelevant. So
yep. And we've had many heated debates, but we never get angry. So that's what
he doesn't.
Oh, true.
And you'll put a link to that in the description so I can follow it, because I'm not even following that yet.
Yep, it's on YouTube. There'll be a link right there in the doobly-doo.
Oh, right in the doobly-doo.
I hate that phrase. Why did I use it?
I've never heard it before. I think you invented it and immediately hated it.
Well, see, it came from Cicero and then John Green and all them. Mm-hmm. And then, yeah, it's terrible.
Okay. So lying. Talk to me about lying. We're going to need to set ground rules on that, right? You were saying beforehand that would be super important.
Yeah, so lying is one of those things where it's really hard to rein in at the margins, because there's obvious lies. Like if I tell you that my dick is small, obviously that's a lie. You guys know that's a lie. But if, let's say, a parent tells to their child that, hey, Santa Claus is going to bring you presents, I mean, that's a lie, but it's a less obvious lie than the other one.
Well, I mean, I guess size is relative, so that could, in theory, be a lie too.
Well, wait a second. I heard this. It doesn't matter. Was that a lie?
I think that might be relative too. I mean, to some people, Santa Claus really matters.
Gotcha.
So, like, the lie with Santa Claus is a lie that I think it's argued that it's better for the child to have this fantasy. It's funner for them, and then if that fantasy is let down over time, it's okay. So it's like a white lie in a way, where it doesn't really hurt things, but it kind of enhances it for, number one, the parents, but also the child too. It creates experiences that wouldn't be able to be had. But this, at the same time, if you try to bring that same logic into adulthood, it doesn't work nearly as well.
Well, I mean, you could say that, but at the same time, I guess it depends on the person, because how much do we romanticize in our own relationships? There are certain things that we tell ourselves are relevant and others that aren't. And is it important for a relationship? Because, I mean, if you always focus on the mundane, then, I mean, that's difficult as well, right? Don't adults need fantasies?
I mean, we're talking about like self-lies within a relationship, though. Like let's say that John really likes Susie, and he like has this like infatuation with her, and he has this picture of Susie which is up on the pedestal, and that's not the real Susie. But that, are you saying that kind of that romanticization is helpful? And let's say John actually starts dating Susie, and he keeps that kind of romanticization. He kind of like sees the good but forgets the bad. That's a kind of self-lie. But does that sort of self-lie have the same implications as a direct lie, where he actually says something to Susie?
I guess it depends on if it's sustainable. If you expect something from it, then it could be harmful, right? Like you're saying, if you put somebody on a pedestal and it turns out that that person does not fulfill the expectations, then that can create disappointment and in some cases even resentment. So that might not be good. But I suppose it's okay to have some romanticism about a person or a situation if you don't have expectations from it. Does that make sense?
I think so. What are your thoughts, Steve?
I don't like lying.
You don't? Okay. Just in general?
In any capacity.
Okay. So
there's like two situations where I think lying is okay. And you guys have neither mentioned any of them. I think the biggest one would be a lie to protect someone in a situation where they would want to be lied to. such as like if you have a family member and you do drugs and they don't understand like that you're doing so in a responsible way, or it would give them undue fear, unnecessary fear, because they don't necessarily understand a certain situation. And so it would be better to lie to them because they're never going to be able to mentally wrap their head around the truth, and instead will, in their own mind, make up a falseness about what's actually happening. Like, this is an awful thing that this person smokes weed, and like it's not an awful thing. So I'm okay with lying in that hyper specific situation.
Really, that's a little bit of a twist, because we actually did a podcast where we talked about lying a little while ago. A lot different than this one, of course, but I said that I lied to my first girlfriend about my smoking of weed, and because I didn't think she was smart enough to understand the implications of it. I mean, I put it pretty bluntly, which is, but it's something that I thought was true. And when I look back on that, I don't think that was a good thing to do.
I would agree.
At the same time, I think maybe a girlfriend is a bit different than like a grandparent, because
Yes.
like, I don't know, if let's say I have a family member and that family member has an alcohol problem, I'm probably not going to publicize that alcohol problem to other people. I might, let's say a kid asked me about it, or like, we'll say my cousin, who is like, say 13, asked me about, what's up with Uncle Dan. And I'm like, oh, well, he just likes to have some fun and goes overboard. Like it's sugarcoating it, and it's kind of telling the truth. But I think it's kind of okay to lie in that situation. But if you're choosing a partner or choosing a friend, it's a little bit different. I think that context is different.
I agree.
So if we had to apply a principle to that, though, because let's look at it this way. If every situation is subjective, which is sort of where we're going, that in certain contexts, it's okay to omit information or sort of sugarcoat information, but then other times it isn't, right? So what's the criteria that we use to actually determine what time that is okay to lie? And I think that's what I was talking about in the beginning with these sort of macro ethical principles, right? So if we take a utilitarian approach, then we can say, what you were saying earlier is that if it's something that you would tell somebody that might cause harm, right? And there's no utility in them knowing it, because them knowing it isn't going to change the fact of it, but them not knowing it isn't going to affect the universe, right? So that's a situation where the utility of lying outweighs the utility of the truth, right?
Okay, so we're right now defining lying, or the ethics of lying, having to do with the magnitude or the effects of the lie. So it's like, if you lie to a child like about Santa Claus, that is less bad than lying to them about, say, something which is gonna do them harm. Like, it's good to run out in traffic without looking, or the thing, or it's good to put your fingers in the electrical outlets. Those are lies, because we know those aren't true. I'm trying to come up with better examples, but there's, or if a kid tries to bully you, you should take a taser and start tasing them.
That's actually good advice.
Damn it, that is good advice.
Stick their finger in an electrical socket.
But there's certain things you can tell a child or tell somebody which are obviously bad and wrong. But then there's the other case where it's not clear that it's wrong or bad. I mean, here's the biggest case. Let's say that someone's on their deathbed. Let's say it's like my grandmother, and I never liked my grandmother. And, she asked me if I love her. And let's say I don't, but I say, yeah, of course, I always loved you. Like, it doesn't do me any harm just to tell her that I did. I mean, in her final moments. I mean, why wouldn't I?
Yeah, I agree. So actually, utilitarian principles, the way I said it was sort of mitigating harm. And that was with the example of marijuana. But utilitarianism can also apply to pleasure. So in this example with telling your grandmother that you love her, it's because there's some type of pleasure to be gained from the lie, but there's no pain caused by the lie, right? But there could be pain caused by the truth, which is that you don't love her.
I really don't like that phrasing, that you're giving your grandmother pleasure. It's not wrong. I just don't like the phrasing too much.
Gotcha. Well, yeah, you're right. I could do. You know what? We'll work on that for sure.
Fair enough.
But you get the idea of what I'm saying.
Yeah, of course. I mean, that's like hyper specific as well. And that would be so hard. But I think it would be the truth though, because like, if I was in a situation where somebody was on their deathbed that I didn't like, I don't know that I'd even be there.
Okay, here's another scenario. This is from what's this? This is from Game of Thrones. Mm-hmm. So it's not spoiler or anything.
Hey, have you been watching a lot of Game of Thrones lately? Because
yes.
You've mentioned it twice now, and I've been here for like less than an hour.
Okay, so there was a character who was being put to death. So it's just a random character, and he's gonna have his head chopped off, and it was for doing something treasonous. And what he told the commander to tell his wife and children was that he died fighting the enemy, that he didn't commit treason. Mm-hmm. And so that would be something that if the commander were to comply with that would be a lie. Mm-hmm. But it's a lie that, I mean, he could be truthful, of course, but it's not a lie that does his family any good. I mean, it's a lie that does his family good, but doesn't do, telling the truth would do his family more harm. I think would be the way to put it. It puts him to like an undue amount of stress.
I think that's a very like to feel that you have the right to make a decision like that, which could change the course of how people think about you, or completely change the course of their lives. Like if those kids, especially in a situation like in Game of Thrones where it's a smaller community, would change their entire course of their life, then I think that's like, you have to really think a lot of yourself to feel that you have the power to make the decision that this is the right thing for them to know. I think no one person can have the knowledge to be able to say this is the right thing to do. I think the truth is always the right thing to do. And whatever happens because of that is what is supposed to happen.
So in that instance, would you, let's say that you are the commander in this mm-hmm. instance, and you cut this guy's head off, but before you cut it off, he tells you, tell my wife and children that I died fighting the enemy. Mm-hmm. You tell him that he died a traitor.
I would say, if I'm assuming this is a situation where I have to be the one to tell them that.
Yes, because you're the commander. At the very least, you may not like be the person. You may not be in person, but you have to either send a letter or put your stamp on it.
No, I would tell the truth, and I would tell that to him before he dies. That I won't do that.
Okay.
They will know the truth.
How about you, Patrick?
So I'm actually going to agree. I think in this case, the truth is what prevails. And the reason why is because of the sort of macro implications. And we're talking about the external possibilities. Because let's say that you tell the lie and you say, well, he died fighting the enemy, right? Mm-hmm. What if that kid grows up hating the people that supposedly were being fought, right? That child turns into a soldier that goes out and kills somebody else's family based on a revenge that they thought they had to get, right? Or, maybe by saying that he died fighting the enemy, then his family doesn't recognize that he was a traitor, and so they might therefore be blamed as well. Because keep in mind, we're talking about times when we're not in the same kind of democratic society that we're in, so there can be ramifications for people like that, and their families can suffer as well. So wouldn't you want to know if you were in danger? Yeah.
I suppose there's another implication there too, which is that if, let's say, the commander does spare the family in this way, I mean, there's those other implications, but there's also the implication that this might encourage more people to rebel because they know that their family won't necessarily suffer, ungravely, knowing that their husband or whatever died in that way, as a traitor. It kind of calls more traitors essentially, or it's more likely to call more traitors because more people will not betray the night. Okay, they won't betray this army for that reason.
Yeah, I agree. There's sort of one sort of interesting twist though, okay? And I will give some credibility to your argument, because let's say that you're a secret agent and you are placed as a spy in a foreign country. So you by default have to lie for your entire career. But in addition, you also lie to your family about what you're doing, because if your family knows the details of what you're doing, that can put them in danger. So it's a very similar situation to, okay, I'm about to be executed, so I want my family to think I died honorably and not dishonorably, right? The only difference is that, in one case, the person being alive, their family can be leveraged, right? And when the person has died, there's no reason to use their family as leverage. I think that's really the thing that changes here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, lying gets really complex. There's so many different situations. I mean, for instance, advertising is mostly a lie. So advertising will tell true things, but it also tells you plenty of lies. And where that difference is between the lies and the truth is kind of like hard to decipher. For instance, there's a company, Red Bull, that makes the energy drinks. I'm sure we're all well aware of that drink. And they had this saying, it gives you wings. And they also made certain implications that it would increase your performance. And there was no scientific backing for it necessarily, that Red Bull specifically would increase your performance. So I think it's the FDA sued them, and they lost the suit, and they had to remove that. So they removed that from all the branding because it was seen as false advertising. And marketing in a lot of ways will make claims which are more ambiguous than that, but that can't be verified. For instance, like you might say, take this class here, take this social acquisition class, and you'll gain appropriate social skills. You'll pick up women, you'll make friends, climb the hierarchy. But the verifiability of those claims is not it's not as verifiable with that, and you can actually blame the person on it. Same with certain medications or certain supplements, or The Secret, right? The book The Secret that says you can manifest things. And that's not, it has certain claims, has certain advertisements, but that hasn't been sued for making false claims, although they're making false claims.
What's interesting about that example is, I would say that they're trying to evoke emotion. So are they false claims? I mean, in most cases they are. You could definitely say that you're not going to get wings when you drink Red Bull, right? Mm-hmm. But you could also say that maybe people took that too literally. I'm sure there are plenty of other brands out there that say things like that you're not literally going to get wings, but that's how you might feel, right? So it's kind of about interpretation. And when you talk about what results you expect to get from a class, I mean, like I took a public speaking class when I was in college. One of the claims of that class is that you'll be able to get up and speak in front of people, and it's going to teach you how to not be nervous, and it's going to teach you how to be colloquial and whatnot. And I'm still terrible in front of people. I mean, I'm sure you guys can tell right now. But it has to do with what you put into it, what you get out of it, right? So some people do come out of those classes with the skills. So is it a false claim, or is it that people expect too much and they think that they're just automatically going to get what they're given?
I think that comes down to phrasing. So like if they phrase it in a way that says, if you take this class, it is designed to do this. That's different than saying, if you take this class, you will do this. Those are very, very different. And I think that's really a really important distinction especially when somebody is paying you for a service or a product, is to be able to say, this is what the intention is versus this is what will happen. Very, very different.
Where I get lost in all of this is, I think people are smart, but a lot of these lawsuits and complaints people make imply that they're really, really dumb. Like with the Red Bull one, I think there's no reason why that should have been taken off, because obviously they're not claiming you should really have wings. If it's making very specific medical claims, I think that's another factor. So for instance, the coronavirus recently, there's been certain products out there which have been claimed to cure the coronavirus or to immunize you against it. And those claims are factually wrong. And so from a health perspective, I have no issue with the FDA or whatever governing agency going after those people and companies for making false medical claims. But if you have a product that has a more general claim where it's just like increases alertness, that's something which is very non-specific. And maybe you take it and it increases your alertness. You're like, oh, hey, this is great, I'll keep taking this. But in most cases, if it doesn't, you just kind of stop taking it. right? And you're like, oh, this shit doesn't work, and then you tell other people. Like, I don't think it's like lying. It's just like it didn't work for you. Like,
so I agree. I think that we've circled this a couple times. So I'm going to try to pin this down, right? It's about the intent, isn't it? That when you tell a lie, whether it's advertising of a product, or whether it's telling a child about Santa Claus, or, you know, whether it's lying to your spouse about doing marijuana, whatever it is, the intent is what actually makes the act belligerent or not, right? So if the intent behind the act is to be deceptive or manipulative, to try and get people to give you money for something that you're not certain is going to play out the way that you claim, right? And you know that. Mm-hmm. Like a good example would be the companies that are being sued for the opioid crisis, right? They knew full well they were telling doctors it was not as addictive as it was, and they were falsifying the information. Mm-hmm. And they were doing it for profit, and we know that. Tobacco companies were the same way before they were heavily regulated. So really, is that what it is? Does it come down to intent?
I think, but there's also like a meta level too. So for instance, there's famous like fitness YouTubers and personalities that will sell lots of supplements and programs, and they'll sell you pretty much anything they can sell you. And a lot of these people, they're on like steroids. I mean, just case in point. Not that really matters too much as a degree of like it challenges how effective their supplements actually are if they use steroids, you know, because that's what they mainly use. But there was one prominent one who, you know, he made claims that with this program you can gain 20 pounds of muscle in a month, and that claim is just ridiculous. Like that doesn't happen. That's not realistic. If you're taking steroids, even that's a little bit too much. And in a vlog, he was saying that, you know, this is the marketing. This is what we do in marketing. Everyone knows it's bullshit. Everyone knows it's just here to get your attention. Like, it's not lying to people. It's just marketing. Like, he made this differentiation between marketing and like truth, right? And he said, once you get people into the program, you tell them what the truth is. You tell them, you know, this is what it is. You knew this was a fact because, you know, when you bought this program, you didn't expect to gain 20 pounds of muscle. No one expects to gain 20 pounds of muscle. But this is what the marketing says, and this is just to get you into the program because you know what you need to do.
I mean, I wouldn't know the difference, so I might believe that something like that, and that's what lies people tell themselves to rationalize and make them feel okay with lying. You know, there's a million reasons that people will say, oh, well, it's not a lie, it's this, when they're just using a different word to mean the same thing, but their intention is lying. I definitely agree. It comes down to intention. So here's a good thought experiment for people, right? Let's say I'm looking outside and I tell you there is a white cat up on the roof right now. And right now there's a black cat on the roof. Am I lying?
Yes.
Just based on the information you currently have.
Meta, you're meta lying is what I'd say.
Okay. Why is that not just an outright lie?
Well, because it's something you could have knowledge of, but the lie that you're ultimately having is that you don't have that knowledge about whether there's a black cat.
Oh no, I'm standing there. Look, I went outside and looked, and I saw a white cat. I'm telling you, I saw a white cat up on the roof.
Okay, so that's a lie then.
Okay, do you agree with that? Given just the information you currently know.
So it would be a lie, but it wouldn't be immoral. And I think that would be the next part of this discussion, because I think we kind of established that the intent is what determines if a lie is right or wrong. So I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think what you're segueing into here is that when you lie about the color of the cat, right, there's actually no intrinsic effect on me or you or the environment, really. Mm-hmm. The fact that the cat is a different color is actually not relevant to me. Not
where I'm going at all. Okay. So let's say, I say it's a black cat, and then in reality, in the physical world, it's actually a white cat, but it was in the shadow. So I honestly believe it's a black cat. Is that a lie? The information is wrong. I'm passing to you wrong information, but I believe it's true.
So it wouldn't be a lie because a lie is based off your own internal knowledge, right? So when you say someone lies, it means that they had knowledge of a truth, and then they either withheld that truth. You can lie by omission as well, or what you said was contrary to that truth that you knew, and that's the same in legal sense. So whenever someone is charged with, I'm sure it's like a more technical term, but lying essentially, what the litigation has to prove is that this person knew a fact and that they provided another fact that was contrary to that one.
So let's say I tell you there's a black cat on the roof right now. I saw a white cat on the roof, but really it is a black cat. Mm-hmm. I tell you something intending to tell you misinformation, but actually I told you the truth. Mm-hmm. Is that a lie?
That is a lie. It's a lie technically, but it's a lie that happens to be true.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that's a coincidence, because you could take that same example and instead of cats, it's something that would actually have an effect on someone's life, mm-hmm. like spreading a rumor about somebody at work. You spread an arbitrary rumor or one that you don't think is true. Mm-hmm. But it turns out later to be true.
Like in The Office.
Right. Yeah. The Office is literally what I'm thinking of. Mm-hmm. Love that show. But yeah, so even if the information is arbitrary and you just made it up, doesn't matter if it turns out to be true or not true. Again, it goes back to intent.
Mm-hmm. And that's, I guess, my point is you were saying, I think it comes down to intent. And I think an example like that exemplifies that most people would agree. And if you don't agree, I highly suggest reaching out to us in some way and letting me know. And I'd love to have that conversation, because I think that's a pretty black and white example as to why intention is really what matters in a lie, whether you just intended to lie and you actually told the truth, or you didn't intend to lie, but you did lie. It's not really a lie. It's just misinformation.
Yeah, that's kind of happened to me a couple of times where it could be a lie. It's considered a lie. Like a lot of times pranks are lies. So you tell someone something, you set them up for the prank. Like, hey, there's something great out back for you. And then they go out back and it's not great. It's actually bad. It's like, I don't know, a pie in their face or something. Right? But there's been times where I've pulled little pranks or I've done stuff like that. I mean, nothing terrible. Nothing like on YouTube. But it's been stuff where I was trying to do one thing and then something else happened completely different. Like, I don't know, like there's something great out back for you. And then they go out back and there just happened to be like a $20 bill. And they're like, oh, hey, thank you for that, Nate. And I'm like, what? I didn't put that there. No, it's the other thing. But I can't tell them that because now it's too deep. Like I can't walk back.
Yeah, I think that's actually karma. But
so you let the coincidence become the truth. Mm-hmm. So then the only lie that exists is in your own heart.
Yes.
Wow, that is karma.
That was very beautifully put.
Oh, thank you.
It's like when somebody asks you a question and you don't want to tell them the answer because you think they're going to get mad, and then they guess something else that happens to fit the situation and you just agree. Right? Because then you don't have to tell them what the real answer was.
Oh, like when you're gonna be caught out, like, hey, I know what you've been doing, and like, I don't know, you've been like smoking lots of weed, I don't know, butt chugging and stuff, and you're just like, oh crap, they know. Oh, what's that? I know that you have been playing that game at night. You're like, oh, thank God. Yeah, I'm so sorry about that. I never meant to do that. Mm-hmm. I told you to quit that game, Destiny 2 or whatever. Mm-hmm. That's a shout out, by the way.
Shout out to Destiny 2 if you're watching. So that's like a lie. That's like you feeling guilty about all of the lying you've been doing. You have all of these lies, and like that's where not wanting to lie and not lying becomes so freeing to me. To like, if I just don't lie, then I never have to worry about getting caught on anything. I would rather take the minor repercussions now than lie and possibly avoid them or have them compound. I never think it's worth it mathematically.
That's true. So the original question, right, says, when is it okay to lie? So then we discussed it quite a bit. So are we able to conclude, like, are there times when it is moral or it is okay to lie?
I think there's white lies, or let's say super white lies, where it's just inconsequential or it's not the point of what's being asked. So for instance, if I ask you, hey Patrick, how you doing? And you say, doing well. I might say, all right. I'm not actually asking you how you're doing. Like there's a literal interpretation of how are you doing, but really I'm just trying to start a conversation. Right.
Well, then you're a selfish prick.
Well,
if you don't care about what the answer is, then why ask it?
Because it's this English custom.
Okay, so fuck custom. Why do you have to conform to custom?
Because I am a product of culture.
Okay, you sheep. I see how it is.
Because we form into societies to feel safe.
And I'm fine with society. I love society, but I don't think that means that you have to conform to every little idiosyncrasy that society dictates.
But I don't think it's like that big of a deal though, because it's something which is custom, it's culture. And you know, when we ask people how they're actually doing, we do it in a different way, right?
Right.
I mean, it's sometimes, but you know, almost everybody knows that if you ask how you doing, not to take it literally.
Right. So I will defend you for a minute, and I'll say that practicing the cultural norms of a group actually shows that you do care. Even though you don't care about the answer to the actual question, conforming to people's social norms shows that you care enough about them that you want to be part of their group, right? So I think what you're really saying, though, with this train of thought is that we also need context. So we already said that when we're talking about a lie, we need to determine intent, right? We also have to look at context, because in your example about the prank, right, the intent was comedy. And what was the context? Because it's very different if you're doing a prank to a friend or if you're doing a prank to somebody you don't like, right? So that would add another layer of complexity to the lie situation.
I'm gonna go one step further on this. So there's this whole thought experiment of, let's say someone's about to like walk in front of like a car, right? And you push them out of the way, then save their lives. Is that really violence, right? Because you know they would have wanted you to push them out of the way. In the case of a prank, what their assumption is this person would have wanted you to prank them, you know, kind of push them into the prank because they would have enjoyed it. You know, maybe not in the very moment they're pranked, but they enjoyed it after because of the story and everything. So I think that's one way of looking at it is, yeah, you're lying to them, but it's a lie that you would have wanted them to tell.
Right. You're both sort of participating in a friendly banter when you're pranking each other.
I don't think I would call pranking a lie.
It's a lie.
I just don't agree with that. I think lie has a deeper implication of nefariousness or something long term.
So
I think lying for like a second isn't really lying.
So I would say it's a lie, but it you could say it's a fib, which I mean, so there's the moral implications to it, which is related to intent, but you have different intents. If the intent is nefarious, then it's maybe, I don't know, there's another word for it. It's kind of like the difference between like kill and murder. Like kill is neutral. Like you can kill someone and it can be out of self-defense. But if you murder somebody, then that's like premeditated, or that's like, you know, you're trying to create malice. Like there's a lie with malice, and there's also a lie that has just like no content. Like if I ask you how you're doing and you say, all right, but you're actually doing kind of bad, but you don't want to go into the whole story because, you know, you don't want to take up 10 minutes of my time and you don't want to talk about it. Well, I mean, that's not like it's a lie technically, but it's not like a lie with malice.
So I guess why would you not want to take up their time? Like if they're asking, like if you say, how are you doing? And I say, I think there's neutral ways to answer that to get across the same thing without lying.
So I think,
like, okay.
I think that
then if someone wants to know, they can ask more questions.
I think it's important not to take the words "how are you doing" too literally. It's more just like a phrase now. Like it doesn't in this context of, let's say you start a conversation with how you're doing, it does not literally mean how are you doing. It's not verbatim.
That's a really shitty way to look at that.
Well, it's true though, because that's how it's used.
That's not how I use it.
It's a choice to internalize. If you're saying I'm doing well, but you're not, right? You're just choosing to internalize. So the malice of the lie, if you say there is any, would be to yourself, because by internalizing, you're bottling up your emotions. And who knows if at some point down the road, because you never talk about your own problems with anybody, and eventually maybe that comes out in the wrong context. I mean, that's a little deeper than I'd like to go with it, because I actually agree with Nathan's point, but I'm just saying.
Mm-hmm. I still think it's a lie, and me personally, I'm not on board with lying even in a situation that seems like it is completely inconsequential.
I mean, I'm not arguing that it's not I'm not arguing that it's not a lie because it's inconsequential. I'm arguing it's not a lie because in most English customs, at least in America, where we are, when people say how are you doing, it does not literally mean how are you doing.
That's not how I take that.
Okay.
I think that that is what it means. I don't understand even the concept behind saying words and they don't mean what
I mean,
you're saying.
that's just interpretation. Like a good example, I used to work in a kitchen in Texas as a cook, and everybody I worked with there was Mexican, right? And so one day the all their wives came in and they had a bunch of food and they offered me some of the food, and I had just eaten lunch. Like, I got on my shift at 2:00, just eaten lunch, stuffed, and I said, no thank you, I don't want any of the food. And they were all really offended, gave me the cold shoulder all day, right? And so I asked one of the guys, Sergio, what's the deal? Why is nobody talking to me? And he said, because it's not about the food. When someone offers you food, you accept, because it's part of our custom. Like, when they offer you food, it means they want you to be part of the community. So they didn't literally want me to sit down and eat with them. They just wanted me to taste it and be like, all right, yeah, I'm part of the group. Right. So I guess that's kind of where he's going with that, is that there's certain expectations when you're in a culture. Right. So when you say it, you don't have to literally answer it. It's just what people do.
But I think that for me, that would be me giving up my own morals and accepting that I have to lie in order to fit in, and I'm not willing to do that. I've offended a lot of people by saying, no, I don't want to eat anything. And my good friend Marcus, right? So the first 4 times I went over there, they bought pizza every time, and they were like, do you want any? And I'm like, no, I'm good. And eventually I had to have a conversation with him where I'm like, is it going to offend you if I say no? And he's like, yes. I'm like, okay, well then in the future I will make arrangements so that I don't end up saying no. So, and I'm like, and honestly, I just met you guys. I don't feel comfortable eating in front of people the first time I meet them. This is a brand new group of people, all people who are really close friends for years and years and years. I had never met them before. So I'm happy to have that very uncomfortable conversation if it means that honesty is at the top of that whole entire interaction. I don't care if I offend you, because if I offend you, tell me I offended you and I can explain myself, and we can actually be stronger because I offended you in the first place, because I'm staying true to me and you're staying true to you.
Okay, I want to figure out if there's miscommunication going on here, because I'm not saying that if, let's say, I ask you how you're doing, that you have to lie. I'm not saying there's any implication that the person who's receiving the how are you doing needs to lie. I'm saying that in general, most people accept it to be the fact that I'm not actually asking you how you're doing. I'm just saying conversation initiator. It's just a more unique way of saying it. It's not literal. In the same way of, like in Spain, they say es la leche, which is it's the milk. Now they're not the thing that's to say it's cool, but they're not actually saying it's the milk. You're saying it's cool. It's a phrase. It's like a placeholder word that has like a meaning. Now, of course, it's one of my phrases I use a lot. Like, how you doing? Like, it's just what I say. And so, like in the last job that I used to work with Patrick on, he heard me say how you doing quite a bit. And,
yeah, we say it 100 times a day. It's just like a generic thing.
Right, and most people will say, "Oh, doing well. How about yourself?" And it's a meta thing where we're trying to show like some sort of interest in the other person as a human. We're trying to break the ice a little bit. It's mostly just a conversation initiator. That way it's not like withdrawal, deposit. We're not like robots. But every once in a while someone will take the question literally and say, oh, I'm doing terrible. And they go on with a story, and if that happens, it's fine. They can do that. It's not bad. They don't have to lie. But if they want to lie, or not even lie, if they want to just go with what the intent was, which is just conversation initiate, they can do that.
I think there was either implication, or maybe it's on my side and it's just inference, that you were saying it's okay to lie in that situation, and I just disagree with that.
It's not that it's okay to lie. It's that the other person's not going to see it as a literal how are you doing. If Patrick were to ask me how you doing, like I'm not actually taking that as a matter of he's actually asking me how I'm doing.
So what he's saying is that we're adding perception to the mix now. So the perception of the person who's saying it. So your perception might be different. And if you interpret it as literally him saying, how are you doing? Right? You don't have to lie. That's the beauty of living in a free country, right? As someone who tends to lean libertarian, I'm all about you being able to say that you want to answer that question literally. But going to something that you said before, it's a little unrelated, but sort of. Where you were saying you shouldn't have to conform to a group's customs if it goes against your own morals, right? In this case, we're talking about lying, but you're right, you don't have to, but sometimes it could behoove you. Like, in South America, dogs are disease carriers. And so oftentimes you would see that they would kick dogs in Peru, right? And so in America, we would find that to be an immoral behavior if someone was kicking a dog, right? But and the same is true for Somalia, by the way. So a lot of times you find that when people come over here from those countries, that they're initially afraid of dogs. And so do they have the right to kick a dog? I mean,
no,
they don't, right? But you could also understand why they might want to if you look at the context of where they came from.
So why does it why if you have an issue with a pest being, and in this situation I would consider something disease carrying to be a pest, existing, then do things to mitigate that don't cause harm. Why can't they put up a fence? Like, why can't they do something that's not going to result in necessitating needing to have physical altercation with another being?
Well, so, I mean, in a lot of these cases, we're talking about villages that may not have the means, or they're perhaps forced to be nomadic because of different conflicts that happen in the area. So it's not always the same circumstance. And I don't think we should be kicking dogs. And I'm also quite certain that it's illegal in the United States. But all that I'm saying is that if you think about the impulse of someone, like, you can understand it while simultaneously disagreeing with it. So, like, if Nathan wants to lie when people ask him, how are you doing, right? You can disagree with his interpretation of the saying while at the same time doing what you feel is right.
Yeah, and I'm not saying that you have to conform to what my own thing is. I'm just saying that if you choose to lie, that is going to affect how I see you as a person and how I will continue to interact with you as a person. It all comes back to everything being internalized in myself. I'm not saying that you can't do what you want to do. You could lie about 100% of things if you want, but that's going to change how I view you and how I perceive you. And I think that if you're taking something that may be a colloquial expression, that's fine. And you can look at it that way. But I think all it's doing is opening up the opportunity for miscommunication.
So I don't really agree, because in practice I've said how are you to, like, say thousands and thousands of people.
Me too.
And it's never had like a miscommunication. Like, there's only been one or two times where someone's like, just started like telling me their life story, and it's like, oh, okay, so they took that question literally. That's okay. Next time I'll just ask them more directly, how can I help you today? Right? I mean, it's just not that big of a deal. I mean, and if someone wants to tell me they're doing bad, they can. Like, I'm not telling them to have to lie.
I feel like it takes the power away from the actual question, though, and the actual words. Because if you mean, how can I help you today? I feel that you should be asking, how can I help you today? And if you mean, how are you doing? Like, that can take away the power of those words, and someone may actually want to have been asked that question in reality.
Well, so the words have various meta levels to them. Like, when you say, how are you doing today, in the case of a customer service interaction, it's got like several layers on top of it. So one layer is, I'm interested in how you are right now, your state, right? Because if someone's angry, you want to find it out. If someone's like, just here to browse, you want to find it out. You would want to find out what their mental state is. You want to initiate communication with them, show them that you're interested in communicating with them. You want to show that you have respect for them, and you want to show all these number of things. And that phrase is intended to indicate all those different things simultaneously. There's not one meaning of the phrase. It's got, say, several or even more meanings to it.
But it's not. Because you're saying now that you are interested in the true answer, but you guys are also saying that you're not interested in the true answer.
No, you are interested on. So the way I'd put it here is that you're interested in the extreme cases, but you're not interested in the marginal cases. I mean, you might be. So if I ask Patrick how he's, let's say I come into work one day, when we're working, and I ask Patrick how he's doing, if he's doing really terrible, I want him to tell me that. If he's doing really good, I want him to tell me that. If he's doing just all right, I want him to tell me that. But there's the whole kind of like slew of middle cases where, he's just going to tell me doing all right. He's not going to tell me his exact wording of his internal emotions, because that's just cumbersome. But if he's actually doing really terrible, because let's say that his wife just broke up with him, or that his grandmother died or anything to that effect, I want to know that because I am actually interested in this mental state. Same when an angry customer comes in, I am interested in their mental state, but I'm not like trying to get in depth into their psychology. I don't want to have like a 15-minute conversation about how their school teacher in 7th grade, gave them a funny look and they still were haunted by it.
So you're really just giving a person an opportunity to opt out, right? So you're asking them a generic question, and if they were to tell you the legitimate answer, of course you'd express concern for it or whatever it was, but you're giving them a chance to opt out and tell you what they want to tell you. So like, if we go back to an example from earlier today about, a kid comes up to you and says, hey, what's up with Uncle Al, right? And you say, oh, well, he just likes to sometimes he has too much fun. That's all. So if the kid were to continue to prod deeper and ask more and more questions, like, then the lie is going to get deeper. But there's a chance that, right, the kid accepts that as that's the answer I'm okay with, and I want to just stay ignorant of it, right? That happens with adults too. Sometimes we choose to be ignorant of things because it makes us happier in some cases. So is it really, it's okay that we're giving somebody a chance to opt out, right?
Yeah, and I don't have a problem with that. But like, let's say so this goes into something that I think a lot of people don't exercise their right to do, and that's not answer a question. So if a kid asks me a thing and I tell him an answer and that's not good enough and he asks more questions, then I can say, I don't feel comfortable answering that because that's the truth. I don't feel comfortable going any further. Maybe that's something you can discuss with somebody else. Your parents would be better to talk to you about that. Something like that. I think that would be a better way to handle that for myself. And it's always for myself than to go deeper into the lie. I don't think you have to go deeper into a lie. I think that's a choice that you make, and saying, I don't know, or I don't want to talk about that is a legitimate response that can get you out of having to lie.
Yep, I think that's true. Yeah, that's definitely true. So I think that's a meme that should happen more because people are asked questions that they shouldn't have to answer. And okay, this is getting a little bit extreme here, but there's that question, there's that like catch-22 question, like, are you still beating your wife? Right? That's a question that will trap people because there's no right way to answer it except not to answer it. So instead of saying yes or no, or what we're going to say, or I don't beat my wife, what you have to say is, I'm not going to answer that question. You have to refuse the question because the question is a trap.
Well, I don't get it. Why can't you answer that honestly?
What is a trick? So if you say you're still beating your wife.
I've never beaten my wife. So where's the trap?
So the trap is that it's trying to get you to talk about beating your wife. Like it's an implication that you're doing it.
And that's fine. And you can have that implication. And my answer would be, I've never done that. And that's the true, honest answer. And there's no lie going on.
So, but the implication is this is a subject that should be being brought up with yourself. Right. And so, like, if you get let's say you get a question about, have you ever raped somebody? Have you ever done this? You could say no. And, certain circumstances, these questions are valid. Like, for instance, if you're trying to join certain federal government agencies, they'll ask you these questions because these are very pertinent to national security and stuff like that. But in normal circumstances, these questions are out of left field and they're used more to associate bad things.
I've never beaten my wife. What makes you ask that?
I mean, now you're asking them a question, right?
Yeah, of course. To reverse the question, it's very powerful.
I'm not saying that you can't answer it that way. I'm saying that it's a very common interview tactic, for instance, with anybody who's a politician or anything. They'll just ask questions and get people to talk about that thing as if those questions are legitimate. But you can reject the question as well.
Okay. How does that tie in?
Because we're rejecting the question. So you're saying you're saying that you don't have to answer a question. So I'm agreeing and I'm providing an example of where you might reject a question.
I understand. Okay.
Because you don't have to say, if someone asks you when's the last time you're beating your wife, you don't have to respond to that because that question is likely there to instigate you. It's likely to disparage you. It's just trying to connotate you with this thing that you don't have any involvement with, And let's say someone keeps asking questions like that. So, when's the last time you raped somebody? When's the last time you murdered somebody? If they keep going on with that, these questions have a bad intent, right? And you could just answer, I've never done that. I've never done that. But it sounds like more you're in denial than, rejecting the question allows you to not take that as even a legitimate questions, that the intentions are bad.
Okay. Yeah, I agree. You don't need to answer questions.
Yeah. Okay.
So, I mean, overall, I think we established there's at least 2 layers to what makes a situation okay to lie, right? And it comes down to intent and context, right? I'm not sure that there's any other layer. There might be an argument for survival, self-preservation in specific situations, because I think that our instincts do kick in. Like, for example, if you're in a long-term relationship, you're married, and I don't know, maybe you question whether you love each other. It's been a long time and there's not as much passion as there used to be. Maybe answering questions honestly isn't what you want to do because you don't want to risk your marriage. And you know that in the long term, this is somebody that you want to be with, but you know that being 100% honest might be harmful to a point where you might not recover. So maybe it's okay to omit certain information, like, I don't find you as physically attractive as I used to, or, I don't think you're responsible with money, right? I mean, there's a context for saying those things, but you might not say them outright out of self-preservation because you want to have a happy marriage and you don't want to experience that pain.
Well, that goes along with there's certain things that you can be honest with, but there's no utility to being honest with them. Like, you could tell people that you think they're ugly or that they're fat or that, a number of any things that you think about them, which are true. And it's true that you think that, but there's no reason for you to tell that person, that thing. Now, maybe if they ask you, do you think I'm fat? Do you think I'm this? Maybe you can be truthful with them if you want. But a lot of times, like, forced honesty in that way can be negative because, we all have terrible thoughts about everybody, I think. And you don't have to share those thoughts if you don't want. And choosing to share those thoughts are maybe negative. And also, there's certain thoughts that you might have that are, say, it just goes along with the state of the relationship. So, for instance, if you have been married to someone, the same person for, say, 30 years, and you're in your 60s and they're in their 60s as well, you can tell this person that they look beautiful, but, if the person said, hey, what do you really feel? I think you look pretty old and ugly. Like maybe you'd still think they look beautiful in some way because you still remember how they look and, there's a whole kind of thing there, but they don't look like they used to. And, you don't have to point it out. It's kind of like the same context. Like, we know we're old. We know we're kind of ugly. We're not in our prime.
And yeah, it's the same reason why you don't tell your significant other when you find other people attractive. Like, they might ask you too, how many times does that happen? You're watching a movie or something, and right, your girlfriend, your wife, it says, do you think that she's hot?
Hell yeah.
Right?
Yep.
And why would you answer that? Because there's no utility.
Oh,
right.
So
I think there's always utility to honesty.
I want to make it clear. It seems like I'm like the most in support of lying right now, but with my relationship with my girlfriend, I've made it very clear that I'm heterosexual and that I like other women. Other women are attractive, and I'm not gonna. If she asks me if this girl's attractive, I'm gonna be very honest. And I also, if I ask her if this guy's attractive, I want her to be honest with me. She doesn't have to answer that question, of course, but if she wants to, she can be honest. I'm not gonna be offended, and I've also said that I want to have sex with other women. And, not that I want to cheat her or anything to that respect, but, there's that drive that doesn't just escape because I'm in a relationship now. It's still there in the back of the my mind. And so I'm not going to lie to her about that because I think it's like a biological thing, at least with me and many other people. Maybe not with Steve because we've had that conversation before. But, that's something that a lot of people experience. And, it's not something I'm going to lie about with her.
See, on that one, I disagree because I think that I do take the utilitarian stance on this. And so where we agreed on the issues with like intent and context, I think just with the emotional aspect of this, I disagree because, I mean, you're saying that honesty sort of like leads to more honesty down the road. I do understand that too. But I think there's really only negative effects of that, of saying, well, other women are attractive, because ultimately at some point, and it might not be this way for people who are younger, or if they've only been dating for a couple years or whatever, but when you're married for 10 or more years, right, some of the spark fades. That's inevitable. It happens with everybody. You don't want your significant other to feel less special or important. So like, if you're always talking about how other people are attractive, at some point that person is going to question, like, do they still find me attractive? And then they're going to wonder, right? Like, I don't know. I just think that even if you're telling the truth about both, you can say, I think you're attractive, but I think other women are attractive too. I just don't see the utility in telling her that.
Because then you're being honest. And if you're willing to be honest with the person that you're, especially when you're dating somebody, I think the utility of honesty when you're with somebody is even more than with the general public. And I already think you shouldn't lie to begin with. So to think that you shouldn't lie about anything in those situations is even deeper.
So I guess you could kind of get me there when it comes to, if she asks me, if she says, do you think that woman's attractive? I guess I can't debate that. But what about omission? What about if you're walking on the beach and you just see attractive women?
Well, you don't need to broadcast every thought you have in your entire life. I think it's when it's with the intention of specifically telling somebody something that isn't true, that's when it becomes a lie.
Right. It goes back to the difference between, like, let's say, I see a really attractive girl in Game of Thrones and I'm like, oh, she's super hot. That maybe that's pertinent to the situation, and my girlfriend's not gonna be too like offended by that. But if I just start bringing up attractive girls everywhere, I'm like, oh, this girl's hot, this girl's hot, this girl's hot, like
yes, no,
like she's gonna see like a secondary implication to that maybe I don't find her attractive, right? It's the same thing where you don't point out fat people, right? You don't say, hey, you're fat, you're fat, you're fat.
Unless you're a doctor, and then it's your job.
Yeah, then it's your job. But because there's no reason, like, you're being truthful there, but there's no reason to. You're not lying. You're not lying by omission either. Now, if
why do you ask that question in the first place? Because I've never asked my wife if she finds certain men attractive, and I'm not saying that. So I'm confident in my relationship, and I don't think that. And I don't need to know if she finds other men attractive, because I feel like that would just make me feel insecure. So I'm not saying this is the case for all people who ask that question, but you have to imagine that some of them are asking it because they feel insecure. So isn't there an implication in the question itself that I'm asking this not because I'm interested in your attraction to the other person, but because I'm interested in your attraction to me? And so in my mind, that makes it a white lie, because you're saying, I don't really think of it that way. Or whatever. You don't have to say I don't find her attractive. You can just say I don't really think about it. That's sort of the opt-out answer that you were saying from earlier is with the example of the uncle, right? I just don't want to talk about it. I don't really think about that because I'm in a relationship with you, right? You might find her attractive, but I think that if she's asking that, there's a good chance that it's because she's trying to gauge the longevity of her relationship with you.
Well, that goes along with the meta-ness of coming back to how are you? There's a meta to that question. Like, so this is something that I learned in a podcast I listened to. When let's say your girlfriend asks you, do I look fat in this? They're not asking you literally if you look fat in that. They're asking you, do I look good in this, right? The wording of the question is not actually what they're trying to get across. They're trying to get across, are you still attracted to me? Do I look attractive in this? Or they might just be, literally asking, is this dress like looking good on me? Like, did I just pull out this dress that looks terrible?
And I think it's really important that if it makes her look like shit, you should tell her it makes her look like shit. Because she doesn't want to go out in public looking like garbage. She wants to go out in public looking good. So I don't see any issue with explaining that in a tactful way. I think there's a good way to do it and a bad way to do it. But if you feel like if she's asking that question of, do you find this person attractive? Then that might be a good conversation to have as to like, I do. What makes you ask? Like, ask her a question back to understand her psychology. Why is she asking that question? Where is she coming from? And if it ends up being because she doesn't feel attractive anymore, then maybe you take the initiative to do something to make her feel attractive that doesn't involve lying to her. Because if I lie and I'm like, no, Daisy Ridley isn't hot, like, she's gonna know I'm fucking lying. Obviously Daisy Ridley's fucking gorgeous. So and especially if she knows like what type of people I like, lying to her doesn't make her feel better. It just makes her think that you're willing to lie to her. And to me, I don't think that's worth it. I think instead I will take what I'm learning from her asking that question and do something to better the situation and make her feel like I do find her attractive.
I agree with that. I think there's a false basis for the question too, because the idea is that, of course, attractiveness have some basis on the relationship, but it's not the entire basis, right? So the idea that if, let's say, my girlfriend wasn't the most attractive person in the world, or maybe I don't find her as attractive as I used to, right? Like, that's fine, but there's other things and other qualities which are overriding that, right? Like, the relationship is not based off the attractiveness, and that's, if she thinks that it is, that if she thinks that I'm going to leave her because she's less attractive now, then that needs to be clear that you have other values to that, as you know, than just that. You're more than just that. There's other things that I am dating you for. And certainly maybe you're not as attractive as you once were, or maybe you are. Maybe there's other women who are, more attractive, but I'm dating you because I'm dating you. I want to date you. I don't want to date other people. And there's a whole, like, the implication that this is the only thing that matters here is, I think, needs to be challenged if that is the case of insecurity.
I think there's a big difference too between saying, do you find me attractive, and do you find me physically attractive? Because you can say I find you attractive, and it means more than just physically. And you can answer that 100% honestly with yes, even if you don't find them as physically attractive as you used to. There are other things that weigh into attraction that mean a lot more than physicality. And I think the truth ends up being more romantic in the long run than a lie ever could be.
But do you think that is the primary concern for everyone? Because I agree with some of the things that you guys are saying, and I think we're being pretty reasonable about this. But if you're somebody that is insecure, okay, and then you ask this question, then is it going to be enough for you if the answer is, I'm attracted to you for these other qualities, and we're in love for all kinds of reasons, but I'm not physically attracted to you, or I'm not as attracted to you as I was, right? That kind of honesty, if somebody is insecure in the first place, that they asked you that question, do you think that they'll be reasonable enough to work through it the way we just did? Or do you think that by telling them, yes, in fact, I'm not physically attracted to you anymore, right, does that do more damage than it does good?
The personal repercussions of my honesty are not for me to make the decision whether I lie or not. If it ends up breaking us up, then we weren't meant to be together. Our relationship's not going to work if I have to actively lie to you. And I think that's okay. And I would be willing to accept the repercussions of the lie if it's the difference between lying to her or not.
Yeah, I'm definitely in agreement with Steve here. Something I'll say is relationships vary on a differing basis. And so me and Steve, we have a relationship where we don't lie to each other. I mean, as far as I'm aware, I don't lie to Steve and Steve doesn't lie to me. And this makes our relationship very stable because if something goes wrong, we know the other person is telling the truth.
And I've told you some stuff before that was very difficult to have to say, but it was the truth, and it was important that you knew, and I knew you would want to know it. So we've had difficult conversations, both of us.
And it's important because let's say it creates a lot less hassle in the long run,
and a lot of trust.
Because for instance, there was a time where Steve came over for a podcast and I wasn't expecting it, and there was miscommunication that happened there. But Steve knew that I would have been ready for the podcast if I knew he was coming, if I knew the podcast was happening, and I knew that if Steve would just randomly come over for a podcast if it wasn't going to happen, I mean, you wouldn't drive that hour.
No, I wouldn't. Hour and a half.
I mean, there are instances that as well. So we have that kind of trust back and forth. Similarly, with the relationship with my girlfriend, I've been very, I was very clear with her and set this up for the start since we started dating is that, we could have two kinds of relationships. We could have a relationship where, let's say you ask me how you look, and if you want me to lie to you, I will lie to you. I'll tell you what you want to hear, and that's the basis of the question. The question means, you might say, how do I look? But what we're really saying is, tell me that I look pretty. Or we have the other kind of relationship where you ask me, how do I look? And I give you my honest answer, and we're completely honest with each other. And we have that, trust. I think either work. I think either are stable, but you have to be, legitimate with that. If someone says that they want to know how they actually look, then you have to tell them that. If they say the other thing, then just tell them lie. I'm okay with telling people lies if they tell me to tell them lies, because that's what the agreement is. And I think, in context of how are you, that's a lie that we have in the culture. I mean, it's not a lie. What we're saying is this is like what the phrase actually means when it means, physically something different, or for verbatim something different. And I don't think either arrangement is necessarily bad, but I think you have to be honest about the arrangement you have. Because if your girlfriend or, let's say your boyfriend or whoever asks you a question and the basis of the relationship isn't always telling the truth, and you tell the truth, how you actually feel, then that shouldn't be held against you. And also, I don't think it's like a matter of necessarily lying. Sometimes people get hung up. So for instance, my girlfriend the other day, she was telling me about her cousin that was going to give birth soon, and she said something about the boyfriend, and she's like, oh yeah, I'm like, so tell me how you really feel, because I detected that something was a little bit off. And she's like, oh well, yeah, and she did her little polite Canadianness, and I'm like, no, just be honest with me. You can be honest with me. This is the basis of the relationship. And she's like, yeah, I don't like it.
And just to be super clear, I don't have an issue if that's the relationship that you guys have, of you both agree that it's okay to lie in certain situations. That's totally you guys' thing. It's just, it would never work for me personally. And everything I've said today is, of course, super personal. I don't have an issue if you guys say something but have an intention of another thing. And I do understand, as much as I made it seem like I don't, the cultural implication of saying, how are you? And most people don't really mean that. I do get that. It just would never work for me. And anytime I'm asking that question, I'm good for hearing how somebody's actually doing. And I wouldn't say, okay, if I'm not really doing okay. I would probably say something more like, okay, all right. Or if it's bad, then I'd probably like, I mean, not great, but what's going on? Or then progress the conversation, because I understand what you're saying, that they probably aren't wondering that. So I'll progress the conversation forward. And then if they ask another question, then we can go back to my answer.
Right. Sometimes you might lie a little bit as well, I think. I mean, it's not really lying, but let's say you're not doing very well, but there's like I don't know, Jonesy, who, if you say that you're doing all right or not well, that they will ask you and prod you and try to talk you to an hour about, what's wrong. And you don't want to go through the hour because you have things to do and you don't like talking to them that much. It's like a coworker, right? So you're not really in a situation where you can really avoid contact with them. Well, in that case, you might say, I'm doing well, although you're not, because you don't want to have a conversation. Whereas maybe with talking to you, Steve, if you ask me how I'm doing, I'm going to be honest with you, because I'm like, I'm not doing well, but let's just move on.
So you're using the royal you in that situation, not saying me personally, because you said you a whole bunch of times. You will do this. You will say this and this. You more mean you as a person. Yeah. Okay. Not me. Okay.
No. Okay. Yeah. Or a hypothetical you, where it's like someone who might say that.
Fair enough. I was just trying to understand, like, if you had examples of situations where you've seen me do that.
Oh, no.
Or because I'm always interested, because I understand I'm going to be hypocritical, like with the grandma example. Like, I'll lie to her about that specifically all day long, and I'll feel a little guilty, but ultimately I won't. And I understand that is 100% hypocritical, but maybe that's the exception that makes the rule.
You're a very strange person, Steve, as far as like your moral. We had the last podcast we did actually went into this quite a bit. It's actually pretty interesting. Somehow we went from what was the question? Like whether you'd read a porn from your dad, and then went into the Holocaust.
Yeah, naturally.
Yeah, but you're a very different person ethically, so I would never like put those kind of things on you. It's more hypothetical. You require a specific explanation for everything.
And that definitely doesn't make, I don't put myself on a pedestal for that at all either. I think it's a detriment to me in a lot of ways, of not being able to do a lot of things that normal people feel are like, obviously that's fine, and everyone knows it's fine.
Yeah, it's different variants. Like Patrick's similar, I think, in different respects, but Patrick's got this kind of like a ethical center to him. So for instance, there was a customer who was being very racist. Like they were saying racist things, and they were on the phone with one of the people from the back office who was Hispanic, and they were giving all these racial slurs. And Patrick, stepped in and started, talking to this guy and told him it wasn't okay. Now, from my perspective, it's. I avoided that conversation. I didn't want to be confrontational because,
self-preservation.
My role as a bank employee is not to, provide political commentary. But
I felt in that situation that my duty superseded my role as a banker. And what I would want someone else to do for me, which is that if I was being persecuted, I would want someone to say something to me. And so, I mean, that's kind of a synopsis of my whole philosophy it's cliche, but do unto others, essentially. So when I'm saying that I think it's okay to lie in some context, I do want to clarify that overall, I don't think lying is a good thing. But I think that life requires compromise. And I think that to have deep relationships with people, we have to become intimate with their needs. And if we perceive that they need us to tell them certain things, then we should be honest. But if our perception is that they just want to be viewed a certain way and they want to be nurtured, like, we can make compromises. And so I don't think that it's bad to lie when the outcome of the situation is that somebody is going to feel better.
I mean, there's certain trades which are just like essentially lies that people comply with, like magicians essentially tell lies, but you go there and you pay them to have you tell, for them to tell you lies. To say, no, there's a rabbit in this hat, and now there's not, and this person's gonna get cut in half, and those are all lies, and we hope they're lies, of course, too, because if someone's really cut in half, there's murder happening on stage. But those are lies within the context of, say, the people wanting to be lied to. Now, there might be other instances, gonna get a little controversial here, with like seances. I'm not a spiritual person at all. I think seances and talking to the dead is, fake. And I think that some people actually believe in it, and some people will do these seances, with goodwill. They think they're actually channeling the dead. But in the case that someone knows it's bullshit and they're pulling all these kind of schemes, and there's been a lot of TV show personalities who have been, caught out for, say, looking up people on Google, finding information, all this kind of stuff. Like the whole big scam. I think that is really, you could say they're still buying into it. The people know it's fake, but they want to be told that they're communicating with their grandparents. But I think there's other people who are just being lied to, and they don't know that, kind of like with the fitness example, where people who don't have that knowledge or information really think this is happening, and you're lying to them in a way that could be possibly detrimental.
Yeah, I mean, a magician's a really interesting example, because I don't really have an issue with that specific example, but I agree that if you're manipulating somebody to, I feel like it comes down to the basis of, like you're saying, people know that they're being lied to or not, and that's really the big deal. If you have a magician who is doing the ball and cup game and is swindling people out of money by being a magician, that's wrong. But if you have somebody doing a ball and cup game and they know that they're being swindled, then that's not as wrong. That's okay.
Right.
It comes down to their knowledge. And is it really, I don't think that's really lying if you know you're being lied to and both of you know that you're being lied to.
Right. So it's a consensual contract, because a parallel example would be if someone's lip singing, that would be lying, because you are selling tickets to a concert and you're under when you buy tickets to the concert, you're under the impression you're going to see somebody sing and that it's going to be their talent, right? But if they're reproducing somebody else, or they're not really doing it, then it's fake, right? Although the argument could be made that if you were entertained and you later found out that they were lip singing, then there was no harm.
With lip syncing, it's a little confusing too, because in most pop, it's so so much the default standard that if you go to a concert and it's not lip synced, you're more surprised. I mean, in rock, that's not a thing, but in a lot of pop, especially on TV shows, it's going to be lip synced because it's just hard to get live sound in there. And you could say that if you had the expectation otherwise that this was legit, then you're being kind of stupid, or you don't know half the knowledge.
I think it definitely comes down to was there anything explicitly said one way or the other? Like if you say come watch me sing and then you're lip syncing, that's fucked up. But if you say come watch me perform and they're lip syncing, there's some gray there. There's some wiggle room to like not have been lying. But if at any point somebody asks you and you are dishonest, then that's lying. I agree. That's really an interesting example. But I like the thought of both people knowing it's a lie being that's a contract. I really like that thought.
One little dumb thing here. We're getting a little bit long here. I think you have to leave pretty soon, Steve, right? So there's one kind of lie that I don't necessarily agree. People will like demoralize it. So let's take Arnold Schwarzenegger. I mean, he's come open about this now, but he used steroids and he's open about it. But there's a lot of people who are asked, whether they use steroids, like Dwayne The Rock Johnson and other people, and they say no. And they say no because it's illegal. Right? Like expecting them to admit to a crime on video is really stupid. Like the idea that question would be posed and they would just come out about it. And I think that's an illegitimate expectation.
Well, right, because that goes to what we said before, which is self-preservation. So that's the third layer, is that if you're put in this, you're basically giving someone an ultimatum there because they have two negative choices. They can either lie or they can go to prison. Right? So that's a double negative. It's not fair. Yep.
And there's a lot of situations like that as well. Like, for instance, in law, you don't have to say anything. It's not a lie by omission necessarily. I mean, there's certain circumstances where they can compel you to speak. But, they take things you say very, very seriously and verbatim. So if you get pulled over by a police officer and they ask you, do you know what I pulled you over for? And you say, I don't know, I was speeding. Even if you weren't speeding, they can get you on speeding because you admitted to it. It's a record, it's evidence that can be put in court, and they'll read it back, and you have to accept it, even if they had you on camera going 10 miles underneath the speed limit. So it's one of those things where you sometimes have to be careful with the way you speak to not self-incriminate, because it could be taken very wrongly. Which isn't lying, but it's not that you have to be forthright.
Yeah, and I agree with that in whole, that you don't need to answer any question. You don't owe that to anybody necessarily. And I challenge people to exercise their right to, if you don't like a question or don't agree with it, to just not answer it.
Right.
There's tactful ways to do that. There's ways to go about that and not seem shifty or whatever. A lot of times reversing the question is really powerful too.
Yeah. I can't say I probably used to lie a lot more than I used to now. I don't really lie much more anymore. There's not really much of a reason to. And if it's anything, it's like the little white lies. Like someone asked me how I'm doing and I don't want to have that conversation with somebody, so I just say all right. But in general, I don't think I lie in general. One technical reason is because it gets really complicated keeping track of all the lies. And because you have to know who you lied to, what you said, and then how these spider webs kind of like go out. And it gets really confusing.
That's super interesting to me that is something that you think you lie about because you don't want to have that conversation, but you don't feel that people are actually asking you to have that conversation.
Say it one more time.
So you said, as far as how are you doing, and you'll lie and say, okay, even if it's not, because you don't want to have that conversation. But you feel that people say, how are you doing, just because that's a cultural thing and they're not actually asking. So they don't want to have that conversation. So are you saying that you're trying to spare both of you from having to have that conversation, because then they're going to feel compelled to ask more questions even though they don't really want them?
I think I'm a little bit mentally fatigued right now, to be honest.
That's fair.
To some degree, but I think maybe I was speaking more in the sense of someone who's legitimately asking that question, like someone who is more of a close friend. Like if it's someone like who is a store clerk, like I'm gonna say all right no matter what. I don't want to have a conversation with them.
Fuck them.
Yeah, like that's not the point of why they're asking. I understand that. Like if I'm a customer somewhere, no one's asking me how I am because they actually are interested. It's just trying to greet me, right?
Okay.
Right. If it's a personal friend, though, maybe I might just say all right for right now, and maybe I intend to talk to them about that later, but now it's not the time. And it's just get past that. And sometimes I don't think it's lying. Sometimes I think it's tabling a conversation, right? let's say you and I are talking, and I ask you, or you ask me, is there anything else you want to talk about? And I actually will probably say yes in your case.
You'll probably always say yes.
I'll say yes, but we'll have to talk about it later. But let's say it's somebody else where I know their personality such that if I say yes, but we'll have to talk about it later, they will keep talking. And they'll say, oh no, just tell me about it. And then there goes another hour of time talking about memetics.
Yeah. I mean, that's when I would just continue with, I'm not ready to talk about that right now. I don't want to talk about that right now. I think there are other ways to do that, but that's, again, totally me. And yours is probably a more elegant approach to just be table it in a way that only you know you're tabling it. I would be a little more forthright with tabling and be like, I'm tabling this conversation.
Yeah. Well, part of the thing here I think we're seeing is that you're very direct and very non-confrontational. So I think there's just a difference in how we approach people in general. Patrick, I don't know what he is.
Well, I'm very introverted, first of all, so I don't share a lot of these things with people. So in the situations you're describing, I would almost never disclose what's actually going on with me. It's difficult even for me to say those things to my wife. So I think I'm a little unusual in that case because I'm technically always going to lie, but just merely by omission, and not in ways that are going to harm other people. Because, again, if it's information that's relevant to somebody's safety or their well-being, or it's going to make them better as a person, of course I'm going to tell them. But, I just believe in a social contract. And again, things are compromising. So if you need to lie to better someone's situation, then I think it's okay.
I know you pretty well now, Patrick, but to be honest, I think if you were to lie to most people, they would never know because your voice is so dry and it's always going to be the same.
People don't even know when I'm joking, so you're absolutely right.
Like you could say, I'm very sad. I'm very happy. It'd be the same exact tone for all three.
Right. Indifferent.
Yeah. Which it is true that people don't tell when Patrick's joking. To me, it's an obvious joke because I have the same kind of humor, just like a dry, just kind of, make a statement and wait for a reaction. But it's been pretty funny. You say sometimes sort of ridiculous things and people just like take it like it's legit.
Yeah. Yeah, I've actually, back in the early 2000s, there were these jokes that you would tell a story that would go on for like 10 minutes and there'd be no punchline at the end. I was awesome at those.
The Norm Macdonald joke.
Yes, exactly.
He's wicked funny. Yeah. I love his humor.
Yeah, so I used to come up with those all the time and I was great at them, and also able to like get people to do things, like tell them, oh, so you start with this and, give somebody instructions and they're totally bogus instructions. And you could, if you were really listening, you could tell, but they just do it. It's great.
Yeah. Norm would tell like a 10-minute knock joke on. He would take a classic knock joke and like drag it out 10 minutes by throwing in tons of other shit, and then compounded how funny it was because at the end you're like, that is a stupid joke, but you made it 10 minutes long.
And people would get so mad. It got to a point where like I'd show up and I'd start talking. I wouldn't even say I'm going to tell a joke. I'd just start talking. And one of my friends, Karen, she'd be like, if you're telling one of those jokes, I swear to God.
Which of course makes it funnier.
Right, because you never know when it's coming.
It's kind of strange because you had that problem and you embraced it. I had that problem and I'm like, I have to figure this out because people keep taking me seriously.
What I really want to know is what other people think. Where should they go about getting a hold of us for that?
Well, they can get a hold of us specifically, We Need to Talk, at facebook.com/We Need to Talk Show or twitter.com/WNTT1. Also, we have a brand new website. It's we need to talk.show. And that's not .com, .show. It's a whole domain that you can get. Also, we have a Patreon. You can donate to us there. But also, you can find another podcast, which is somewhat tangentially related to this one, at least 2/3 tangentially related, which is...
It's called Does Anything Matter?
Because, does anything matter? It's a great question that we ask ourselves. And we've talked about lying a lot here today. And does lying matter? It seems like it does, mostly. But then a lot of times maybe it doesn't. We're a little bit not unanimous with that.
Most things don't matter, but we try to figure them out.
Yeah. I mean, when does lying matter? When doesn't it matter? That's a great question. And it's a question that we tried to answer today. And did we?
Yeah, I think we did a really great job of like explaining how each of us personally feels, and I think we're all a little bit different. We have a lot of the same cores, but some of us are way more extreme than others. I'm very well known for being an extremist. So, wait, don't take that out of context.
And I think one big thing is that, you know, although our views are different, they're compatible with each other so long as we know the other person's, say, views. Like, I know how to talk to Steve, and Steve knows how to talk to me. I know what the protocol is. The protocol with someone else, let's say me and Jane, might be completely different.
Yeah, but fuck Jane.
Well, I would if I could, but I'm trying to end this.
Oh, okay. Well, I think you and Jane need to talk.
No,
Oh, okay.
we don't need to talk. Why? 'Cause fuck Jane.
That's a really good ending.
All right. Well, thanks for having me on, guys.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. And so where you guys have that podcast, and I'm really excited to listen to it. And the link will be in the description as well.
Yep.
Or what did you call it? A thingamadoo?
The doobly doo.
Doobly doo.
Yeah. Sometimes you gotta do the doobly doo.
Nate, we need to talk.
Get it.
There it is.
Oh my god.
Oh, thank God. That's how you know you got good content. Oh, thank God it's over. Whoa, it's warm in here, huh? Yeah.